feminism still relevant today? Well, let's try and answer that. Today we're making courgette, or as American viewers know it, zucchini chocolate cake. Sounds odd, I know, but I promise it's very tasty. Here's what it should look like at the end. So, if you're sitting comfortably and you've preheated your oven to 180 degrees Celsius or 365 degrees Fahrenheit, then let's begin. The root of the word radical, it comes from the Latin radix, meaning root. Radical feminism focuses on the root causes of women's inequality and seeks to eliminate it. And what is the root cause? Patriarchy. We'll smash the patriarchy by smashing the social norms and institutions that men have forced upon us, rather than through political means. Mix together your wet ingredients now in one bowl. Your eggs, your sugar, your shredded courgette, olive oil and vanilla essence, while I explain a bit more about it. By the way, I peeled the outside of the courgettes before shredding it. Radical feminism is closely associated with second-wave feminism. Where first-wave feminists were concerned with legal rights such as voting, rights of divorce, second-wave feminism sought to expand our view of oppression to tackle all the cultural ways in which women are oppressed, through societal norms, through gender stereotypes, whilst also furthering women's sexual freedoms with wider access to birth control, abortion, and quite revolutionary books like My Secret Garden, which emphasised that, shock horror, women can enjoy sex as much as men. It's also from this era that we get the phrase, the personal is political, which argues that how men and women relate is shaped by everyday interactions and exchanges. How a man views and uses a woman's body, or simply her physical extension in space, both determines and reinforces patriarchy. These are only broad strokes characterisations because I don't have time to write an 8,000-word thesis on the subject. In terms of action, radical feminists are most remembered for the 1968 protest at the Miss America pageant, throwing ink bombs and flour at Bob Hope. A group of women also threw such tools of the patriarchy as high heels, glossy magazines and bras into a freedom trash can, which they were planning to set alight, but didn't because police wouldn't let them for health and safety reasons. This is the origin of the feminists' burning bras myth. One group of women at one event threw some bras in a trash can and didn't set them on fire. Myth busted. Oh, I forgot to add the sugar. Now mix dry ingredients together in a separate bowl. Self-raising flour, mixed spice and cocoa powder. So how does this compare to today's feminism? A few things. Firstly, third-wave feminism is characterised by a lot more laissez-faire attitude about how women should behave. Third-wavers care more about women taking control of their own bodies and doing what they want with them. Want to have sex with another guy every night? Sure. Want to be a prostitute? That's fine. Do you want to wear high-heeled shoes and pretty sundresses because you like them? You do you, my feminist friend. So there's often a lot of tension between classical radical feminism, which often had strong ideas about how women should act to throw off the patriarchy, and these third-wave progressives. Note, there isn't a hard and fast line between these waves and different perspectives. There are plenty of radical feminists who were more open to women acting however they liked in the 60s and 70s. It is true of all movements and in all times that what starts as a homogeneous message over time is overrun by a plethora of different attitudes to the matter. But generalising, how do these radical feminists believe that women should act? Well, there tended to be a lot of sex negativity, if you could call it that. Radicals were anti-pornography and anti-sex work, believing that women who engaged in it were feeding into a patriarchal system, and if they cared about their sisters in the movement, they should stop working in those industries. Again, this is not a homogeneous view of the time. Many people disagreed. We often balk at this today because the idea of women telling other women what to do with their bodies is just as belittling as men telling women what to do with their bodies. Radical feminists are also perhaps unfairly, seen as more militant than other groups. Loud, placard-carrying, Amazonian warriors against mankind, happy to climb up on a soapbox to get their message heard. There are other distinctions between second-wave radicals and their third-wave counterparts. The third wave is known for being more intersectional. Intersectional healing! Meaning, it's more concerned with the interplay of oppressions, race, class, etc., as well as gender. And sadly, radical feminism, both then and now, has a reputation for being quite transphobic. Figureheads such as Germaine Greer and professional antagonists like Julie Burchill have been known for their unaccepting stance towards transgender women calling themselves women, earning them and their peers the name TERFs, or trans-exclusionary radical feminists. If asking the question, is radical feminism still relevant, I'd say that branch of the ideology is relevant in that it still needs to be discussed, but it is not an opinion to which I subscribe. Now that I've run through the history, let's get on to answering the question, while blending everything so far. Is radical feminism still relevant? First, in terms of challenging the root causes of inequality, yes, clearly there is more to women's oppression than simply economic or political inequalities, the both of which have, for the most part, been eliminated or at least reduced in the Western world. Gender norms do still contribute to women's varied levels of success in certain fields. There are nowhere near the number of women in STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering and mathematics, at universities and industries as there are men, in part due to stereotypes girls learn from a young age about these being boys' subjects and women not being good at science. Aside from volleyball, women's sports get considerably less coverage and sponsorship money than men's do, for similar reasons that people perceive the quality isn't as good because women aren't as athletic, and despite the continued legislation to make it easier for women, new mothers are consistently undermined across industries because child-rearing is seen as predominantly the woman's job and are passed over for promotions due to taking time out. But if mothers want to combat that, they can pay for childcare, and then mothers are criticised for not spending enough time with their children and choosing career over family, in a way men never are, and still other women are criticised for staying at home and loafing about when they should be contributing. And if they didn't want to send their kids to childcare, they shouldn't have had kids in the first place. On top of that, women are selfish for putting off having children until later in life when there are health consequences for having a child. And so yeah, there are clearly a lot of harmful gender stereotypes we still need to break down. I'm going to grab a new spoon and then add the hazelnuts. What about the anti-sex work stance? Well, I do take the opinion that a woman's body should be her own, and feminists shouldn't tell her what she should do with it for the good of the movement, but I think it's important that women acknowledge that they may be reinforcing norms about women as docile homemakers, people who enjoy knitting and baking and cooking and... Hey, I'm doing this in an ironic way. That actually just makes it sound worse, doesn't it? Okay, women are a multiplicity of things. Different likes and dislikes, character flaws and positive traits. Everyone is different, and for women to decide that women who like dresses aren't proper feminists would be silly. What we should be striving for is for women to be respected by men no matter how they perform their gender. But when it comes to sex work and pornography, radical feminists might have a point. I mean, what reinforces patriarchal ideas like women's bodies being available for men's pleasure, like giving up your body for men's pleasure? My personal conviction is that, even though I don't like it, I have to accept that we're highly unlikely to live in a world where pornography and prostitution are eliminated, and in such situations, it is far better to make things legal, regulated, possibly even unionised, so that women are best protected. Now, I'm going to oil up my cake tins and cover them with cocoa powder, except I've run out of cocoa powder, so I'm using hot chocolate powder. It's close enough. This makes it easier to get the cakes out of the pan later, since they won't stick so much to the sides. oven for about 40 to 50 minutes.
Concerning militancy, it's pretty hard to pin down what we mean by that. You could certainly call some of the suffragettes militant. Mrs. Pankhurst's favourite slogan was "Deeds, not words," and women engaged in hunger strikes, law-breaking, damaging property and blowing up pillar boxes. That is definitely militant.
But I can't think of anything that comes close to that in modern radical feminism. Demonstrations, rallies and sit-ins are nowhere near that. It seems some people confuse the word militant with activist, because of course we're going on marches and hold rallies. That's part of what activists do. Yes, real change tends to come from long-term, one-to-one interactions or through policy change, but making your voice heard in public and showing there's a demand for change is the first step. I realise so far that I've been arguing about radical feminism from a more dictionary definition of radical that doesn't quite correlate to the common conception. But I'd argue that these two parts, radical, root-attacking ideas and militancy, sort of shoutiness, do make up our more common conception of radical, aka scary, crazy, out there. And that's what I want to conclude with, really. Oh, and by the way, I'm getting ready to make the icing. In that sense, certain parts of feminism will always be radical. If you're a man who likes the way the system is and doesn't want it to change, then feminism is inherently threatening. The rights that women are seeking in many parts of the world, like Saudi Arabian women's struggle for suffrage, women's right to education, to be in parliament, to end child marriages, and much more, are radical ideas in certain parts of certain countries and cultures. Anything that challenges the norms of a society will be seen as crazy and unreasonable, especially if it means taking total power away from one group and sharing it with another. In which case, radical feminism is incredibly relevant across the world today. But I'm also resentful of the kowtowing stance many feminists have been forced to take, a sort of backpedaling. Oh no, I'm not a hairy, angry lesbian. I wear makeup and enjoy dressing up. This refutation gives all the power of the conversation to the critics of feminism, the ones who call us angry, hairy lesbians. I feel like we paint ourselves into a smaller and smaller corner where promoting feminism becomes about denying what our attackers would say about us, rather than sending out positive messages. Like, yeah, I am angry, because the system works against me and against my friends. I'm not gay, but stop using lesbian as an insult. What I'm saying in a convoluted, slightly ranty way is denying what you aren't leaves little room for you to put forward what you are. So I think owning up to the inherently threatening idea of challenging the system and being unafraid to propose unpopular changes is an important part of feminism today. And that's another way in which I think the radical, shouty, placard-carrying side of feminism is still relevant today.
And I'm just going to speed through putting the icing on the cake. What I'm putting on next is just melted white chocolate as decoration. Now,
if you'll excuse me, I have some patriarchy to metaphorically smash. Tasty. Actually, before you go, I have one of these patriarchy smasher rolling pins to give away. Post comments below and the one I find most interesting, or say the best feminist themed limerick, will win it. There once was a Feminist Baker, a budding amateur filmmaker. She'd bake all the day, then film it away and upload it several hours later. I'll work on it. Ta-ta!